All right, this is Dustin Garmon with from KSW. I just want to do a quick deck tech real quick. This competitor, when he first came out, I was so tickled. So I used him in the Worlds last year's Gen Con. He is my top 6, and I was wanting to share with you the deck that I built for him that I actually played at Gen Con. This is Numer01, or Numer01, I should say. His gimmick is when your opponent rows 10, your turn row is +2, which is real dead, really sick. Just with the gimmick. So to start out with the first 3, you can see I have a volley of strikes and chain wrestling, and also clutching to opponent. As you can see, normally these are stock leads. For me, going with his gimmick, you can tell that the strike on Numer01 is actually a 7, so volley of strikes is going to make it an 8 to go with the gimmick. And with chain wrestling, it's going to make the technique go to a 10 on turn rows, and also with the clutching to opponent, it's going to make the submission a 9 on turn rows. And the reason for this, having the volley of strikes go through, it's going to give me an 8 on strike. Chain wrestling gives me another 10 and a 9 on turn rows. So also, having these 3 in play, judging by his gimmick, anytime your opponent rows 10, it's +2. It makes it really deadly, because it'll actually give me a 10, 10, 8, and another, or a 9 to mess with a 10. It is really deadly, and I've had it to go through a lot. The next 3 I have is just your typical, just your kick, hip toss, or an arm bar, just to stop any follow-up strikes, follow-up submission, and follow-up grapples. With 7, 8, and 9, I have the knife edge chop, which flip to or take a follow-up. No, excuse me. Take a follow-up. The follow-ups, by doing that, I like to stay balanced. So being able to flip to or take a follow-up, most of the time I say take a follow-up, because at least I know that if I've got follow-ups in my discard pile, I'll take one and I'll be able to have one out if I win the next turn row. Call to the crowd. Everybody knows call to the crowd. You can either, you can either play additional card, or if they have, if you have low cards than your opponent, you can draw 2. I typically love that one, being able to play another card. And I have the arm buster. And the reason I have that one out is just to stay balanced, like I was saying. Is anytime I roll my submission, I can grab it, play it, and, at least I get a submission out. Draw 1 and then bury 1. With the 10, 11, and 12, I also like to stay balanced. But a lot of times I like to either draw, but a lot of times I also like to add to my turn row. And as you can see here, I've got the 10 as if you have another lead in play, draw 2 cards. Drawing is also always a good thing. And as you can see here, the 11 and 12 are similar. If you have another lead in play, your next turn row is +2. I typically love adding to the turn row, especially with his gimmick, because anytime, like I said before, anytime they row a 10, it's +2. And if I can get all these cards out and get the pluses to them stats like earlier, it's definitely a plus. So having the +2 can also be deadly in Numer01. The 13, 14, and 15. 13 will give me another stop, of course, because Numer01 is his agility is a 10, so it gives me another stop for a grapple. And also, to keep it balanced again, I like the 14, flip 2 and add flip 2 into your discard pile and put 1 on top of your deck. And also, as you can see, the cross-arm chicken wing, it's actually the technique version. Either one would actually work for him because his submission's also 8. But this one's the technique, you know, take 1 for your discard pile, next turn roll plus 2, adding to those turn rolls.
Would you put that in this?
The 16, 17, and 18 goes with the same concept. Of course, you know, I like to keep it balanced, being able to draw, of course. So I've got just your typical shoulder block. Draw 1 for each other follow-up you have in play. Judging from what I was saying before, is keeping it balanced, is the 17 is the slingshot suplex. It's going to add +2 to my next turn roll if I have another follow-up in play. And as you can see here, I have an 18 is the flying head scissors. I was so tickled when this came out. I can, you know, it's kind of like your press slam, or not the press slam, but the, I think it's the walk-in slam. I can't remember the name of it. But draw 1 card for each follow-up you have in play and bury a card in your hand. When the crowd mirror is 2 or greater, this is also a lead. So at least I could get a lead, maybe play a finish after, if I can use this follow-up as a lead.
Do you want it? Thank you.
And going by from what I was saying, as you could tell, my 1, 2, and 3 was adding to my pluses. If I could get volley of strikes in, the number 1, that takes the place of, you know, kick and the others. It's +1 to the strike, which will make it a +1 on the turn row. If I can get that out, or even this one, it'll still make my strike an 8. If I can get both of those out, the 1 and the 19, kick to the head, +1 to strike, it'll make it a 9. So my stats then could be 10, 10, 9, or another 9 if I can have all those pluses out. If I don't have all the pluses out, it just gives me like a 9, 10, 8, and an 8. So 2 ways to bump or 2 ways to beat a 10. And your 19 or your 20 and 21 are just your typical, if you have another submission or another strike, it gives me extra stops. My 22, 23, and 24, I have splash in the corner. I like to keep it balanced also with these, especially late in the game. You can take 2 from your discard pile, shuffle them, and draw 2. I definitely love that, especially if you don't have any cards or you know that you're getting real low. You'd be able to just, you know, shuffle and draw 2. And these, of course, is your the flying face buster and the inverted face lock. Those are those rare promos that, you know, they're pretty high on the, I guess you can say, on the store. They're, I think, $20 a piece, if I ain't mistaken. But it's the flip 4 and take 1 out of your discard pile. That is both of these. And also the 25, 26, and 27. I love the stop any submissions or stop any grapple or strikes because I'm not much on the stop a lead or a finish because I love being able to stop a follow-up, especially if your opponent plays like a press slam, full Nelson, or a 718. And those are just your typical, you know, the bury, grapple, submission, strikes, and your next turn row is +3. So stop any's are always my favorite. I would go on. And also his finishes are actually his finishes. I don't use generics in him. Because on this one, if your opponent's turn row was 10, this card is also a follow-up. So, judging from what I was saying, adding to stats and beating 10s, I like to keep it in there because most time I will beat a 10 if I can get those stats out there. So I can at least play this as a follow-up. I like to go with his finished grapple because it will make my 5 and 8. And I can also look at my opponent's hand, choose one card, and bury it. That is pretty good. And also, his brutal most finish that I will say is his best finish is the finish submission. Because he'll add +2 to power, +1 submission, just make his power 8, and his submission a 9. But the brutal thing about his finish submission is I can keep hitting it. When this card is in your discard pile and your opponent's turn row is 10, I can quickly add this. As soon as it's 10, I can add it from my discard pile to my hand. So the more my opponent rolls 10s, if I can beat those 10s, or at least, I can bump, I can keep grabbing them out of my discard pile and just keep playing it, keep playing it, keep playing it. Which also, that just goes with turn rows. So that was my entire Numer01, your Gen Con top 6 deck. Look for more deck techs from us, and I'd love to see y'all's videos. Thank you.